What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Draft Business as Usual podcast. I am Daniel Fowler, creator of DraftySports.com, and I'm your host for this podcast. You can follow us online by subscribing on YouTube or follow us on social media at Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Just search for Drafty Sports and you'll find us. So, what is this podcast gonna be like? Obviously, there are hundreds, if probably thousands, of fantasy football self-made analysts, self-made experts out there talking about player rankings, who to draft, who to pick up on the waiver wire, talking just all kinds of stuff. I follow a lot of Dynasty football podcasts because that's near and dear to my heart. Dynasty football is where I got my start, fantasy football. And so it's just a lot of fun to talk about those things, but that's not what we're talking about in this podcast. In this podcast, I'm going to talk to you about my realm of expertise, which is web development, but I'm not going to teach you how to code or anything like that. So don't tune out if you think I'm gonna show you how to program. That is not the case, but I am going to pull back the curtain on what it takes to build a drafting website. We're going to talk about a lot of the mechanisms that happen in the draft room when you're auction drafting. There's a ton of things that are going on simultaneously, and honestly, I underestimated the task when I started to build Drafty. And so we're going to talk about those kinds of things. We will talk about some of the features that Drafty has to offer. I'm not going to promote them to you, but I'm just going to talk through them. Again, why they exist, why they're better than what else is out there, and how they can help you with your upcoming draft season. So we'll dive into all that. And then in this episode specifically, I'm going to give you some of my background, like I said, and we'll talk about privacy and why Drafty charges for its services at the end. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first. And my background is in, like I said, fantasy football. I've been playing fantasy football for about 12 years. But honestly, my bread and butter was fantasy baseball back in the day. Back in when I was probably 8, 9, or 10 years old, I started playing fantasy baseball via paper. If you remember that, the internet was barely a thing back then. This is the mid 90s. And so it was the internet was there, but fantasy baseball, fantasy sports had not really taken off in the digital realm yet. So I got into fantasy baseball with my family, and it was a lot of fun. And eventually, I just got sick of it because 60 games in, 2 months in, I couldn't keep up with the daily upkeep of changing my lineup and everything. So it got to be a lot to do, and so I kind of stopped and fell away from it. In college, I got plugged into college football, and when I graduated college, I got into the NFL. And when I got into the NFL, I immediately jumped into fantasy football, and I just like, whoa! I thought this was the greatest thing ever, weekly upkeep, and it made watching the NFL super interesting because I could root for any team. So it was a lot of fun. So I took that passion. It's just been a hobby for a long time. And my primary league has always played in ESPN. And so over the years, I've played in ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, Flea Flicker, and one brief stint with my fantasy league. But again, my primary league has always been in ESPN. And over the years, I just really got very cynical about ESPN and how good their fantasy product was, which is not very good because they tout themselves as the worldwide leader in sports, and yet for years and years and years, they neglected their fantasy sports product. And they just let it fall by the wayside. And it was so bad. And there were some clear improvements that they could make. And as I got into my profession as a web developer, as a user experience professional, I realized that they could just make some basic tweaks to their user interface and could make it a world better. And I put out a full-length article detailing a lot, just most of the things, probably about 10 or 12 things that I identified that they could just easily do. And I know this as a web developer, they could easily make those changes and improve their product. And yet for years and years and years, they didn't change a single thing. So if you look that up, you can find it. I'll probably talk about it again here in a later episode. But that's my background. So I got so fed up with the ESPN experience, specifically the draft room experience. I always have loved auction drafts, even though my leagues don't participate in auction drafts. I would mock draft auctions just to have fun. And what drove me crazy is that in every single website that does auction drafts, there was always an opportunity for stupid mistakes to happen, such as someone puts in a manual bid everyone else is spamming the bid button, and if the price jumps, suddenly one or two or three extra bids come in, and they're like, "Oh crap, I didn't mean to do that." Specifically, this happened to me, or it happened to my brother 3 years ago when we started a dynasty. 4 years ago when we started a dynasty league, we did our startup draft, and he was one of the people just bidding on AJ Green, bidding on AJ Green, bidding on AJ Green. He is from AJ Green, played at the University of Georgia. We live in Athens, Georgia, so everybody loved AJ Green. One guy went to place a manual bid. This is on the ESPN interface, for $40. So when he placed that $40 bid, everyone that was bidding, like just the place a bid button, um, immediately accidentally there were two accidental bids. One was another guy, and then immediately after him, my brother. This is all just in a split second. The problem is that the guy who entered a $40 bid for AJ Green typoed. And so he bid $140 on AJ Green. Now we had a $300 budget, so it wasn't, a total killer. But yeah, he bid half of his budget on AJ Green accidentally. And subsequently, another guy bid 141, and my brother bid $142 on AJ Green, and won, obviously, AJ Green, because everyone, when they saw what happened, stepped back. It was like, oh, several of us were in the room together. It was a moment. It was glorious. And that has been a stigma my brother has now carried for a long time, that he bid $142 on AJ Green. He went on to win the league 2 years later, so it really didn't cost him that much. But so it was worth it, I think. But anyway, that is the prime example that I always point to when I talk about why I built Drafty. And so transition a little bit from me into Drafty. I built Drafty in 2016, and the early iterations were crap. They were terrible. They were really, really bad. I underestimated how much work and how many nuances and what if scenarios that I had to account for in building a better auction draft room. So it was quite an experience in 2016. It was still terrible in 2017 and 2018. Because again, this is, it's not making any money. I charged for drafts, I think since day one. It was really small back then. I think I was charging like $4 per draft. And even just growing a startup from nothing, self-funded, no investors, is really difficult to do. Maybe I'll talk about that in a future episode. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. But ultimately, I underestimated it. It was a side hustle, was making no money, and so I didn't give it the attention and time that it needed in order to make it a viable thing. About a year ago, I went into business for myself. I quit my job as a full-time web developer. I spent 10 years at a public university doing web development on really big websites, and then I spent 3 years at an e-commerce corporation and got out of that pretty quick because I hated it. But all in all, I started my own business, and so I was able to devote more time into making Drafty what I knew it could be, as well as a couple of other sites, but you didn't come to hear about those. So Drafty kind of started in 2016, but I really didn't devote enough time to it until 2019, last year. And then the pandemic happens in 2020. And so we have grown a lot in 2020 because of the pandemic. Because what happened is a lot of folks, a lot of leagues out there have their drafts in person. You might be one of them. And because of the pandemic, they were not going to be able to gather in person. And they went online searching for an online solution that could host their draft. Luckily, in 2020, for the first time, I also started offering custom draft rooms. And so these league commissioners stumbled upon Drafty, and it sounded like Drafty could do what they needed it to do. And of course, I built a lot of custom features for them. Looking ahead to 2021, I'll be able to roll a lot of those features into the standard feature set for Drafty. And so it's been a great experience in 2020, growing Drafty, having lots of conversations with commissioners about their league settings. I didn't do everything that people wanted. For example, hybrid drafts were a popular request this year, and honestly, I've never heard of a hybrid draft. A hybrid draft is where a portion of your draft is a snake format, and then a portion of your draft is an auction format. And I thought it sounded awesome. I want to be in one of these leagues, but Drafty does not support that. I've specialized in auction drafts for the past 4 years, Well, really, I'll stop saying 4 years. Really, I've been specializing in auction drafts for a couple of years, and so this was a brand new concept. Now for 2021, I'm already working on a snake draft room that's going to be better than what the mainstream sites have. Um, and you better believe that when I roll that out, I'm also going to begin trying to tweak it to bring the two formats together into a hybrid draft format. So look for that in 2021. I'm so excited about it. It makes me really excited. So like I said, Drafty specializes in auction drafts. That's why we have the best draft room you're going to find for auction drafts. That's all I did for like the first several years of building Drafty. It was just auction drafts. But something I found, actually, I said it was all I did for the first few years, but when I started building it in 2016, the first thing I came across was, okay, I gotta have some kind of player rankings in here. So how do I do that? I don't want to put out my own player rankings. Nobody cares about who who I rank, my top 400. Um, but also the upkeep of that. Again, not really getting paid for Drafty, trying to do this in my spare time. It just wasn't viable to believe that I would keep a full list of players updated in my own database. So I went hunting for an API or a database that I could plug into and pull player rankings into Drafty automatically. Well, those are crazy expensive because most fantasy football websites and podcasts are sponsored by some larger company. And so they have resources at their disposal where they can connect to those type of things. But I do not. And so when we start talking about two to four, I think the cheapest one I found was probably $199 per month to subscribe to this API that would feed me player data, player names, active roster information, stats, all those things. $200 a month is a steep pill to swallow for a product that I'm not making any money on. And I'll talk more about that in just a sec. But anyway, suffice it to say, I struggled to find a player rankings system. And so for the first few years, and this is part of the reason I didn't devote more time into Drafty in those first few years, I just didn't have the time to devote to updating the player rankings every single year. I think it was in 2018 specifically. I felt so bad because I probably had a dozen or so people come and draft, and then email me later wanting a refund because their draft completely came to a standstill when they realized there were players missing from the database. And it was the second year players. Like I always pulled a list of the rookies, or in fact, I would watch the NFL draft, and every single pick that came in, I would update the database and enter that rookie's information into Drafty. And so rookies were not a problem. The superstars from a year or two prior were not a problem, but it was those second year players that had emerged in their first or second year um, that flew under my radar. And so Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, maybe not Joe Mixon because he was a highly touted rookie, but Aaron Jones, tight ends. Tight ends always just pop up out of nowhere in their third or fourth season, and you don't know where they came from. So anyway, all this to say, I underestimated the time it would take to plug in player rankings. So what I ended up doing is I wanted to provide a way that the community could get involved in the player rankings because that's something that I hate. I want player rankings for myself. And I see, CBS's player rankings or ESPN's player rankings, which I never look at. But Fantasy Pros, they have player rankings, and I love how they do it because they bring they take the average of several experts, and they average out their player rankings into their ECR, and it's fantastic. It's awesome. I love that. But still, in all, I still disagree with some things. There are some players that I think should be much lower than they are ranked. So with Drafty, what I ended up doing was creating what I think is a fun and super addictive little mini game. It started out being called Player Pick'em. Now it's called Quick Pick. So if you go to draftysports.com, select your sport that you play fantasy in, and look for the Quick Pick option in the dropdown. If you play the Quick Pick, it just in rapid fire succession gives you player A or player B. If you were in a draft and you were on the clock, time's ticking down, and you had to make a choice, and you're settling between these two players, which one would you pick, player A or player B? Would you pick Joe Mixon or Aaron Jones? Would you get Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley? Odell Beckham or I don't know, Jarvis Landry. They're on the same team now, so that's crazy. And so it was a really fun idea for me because I love those types of questions. I'm a bit of a psychology nerd. And so I love to rapid fire ask people like, what's your favorite soda? And they're like, I don't know. What's your favorite vegetable? I don't know. Well, okay. But we can rapid fire and figure this out. You like, which would you prefer, Sprite or Coke? Coke. Okay, cool. You like Coke or Dr. Pepper? And they're like, Coke. And I was like, okay. You like Coke or Mountain Dew? And they're like, oh, Mountain Dew. I'm like, okay. Sprite or Mountain Dew? And they're like, Mountain Dew. And so you just do that until you finally determine for yourself what your rankings are. And so I took that philosophy, that quick one-on-one. I think it's called what do they call it? I saw somebody call. I forget what they called it, but I call it quick pick. And what that does is in real time you are impacting the player rankings. And so every preseason I reset the rankings to probably it's usually the Fantasy Pros ECR or something. But from there on out, everyone who if you ever play the quick pick, every time you select a player, you are giving that player a little boost, and the player you didn't select is dropped down just a little bit. And so the numbers behind it spit out the player rankings. And so it's I think it's really cool, and hopefully you do too. It's super addicting if you're ever trying to kill time before a draft. Your draft's at 8 o'clock and it's 6 o'clock, and you're just watching the clock, and the minutes won't tick away fast enough. You can go play the quick pick, and next thing you know, 45 minutes are going to be gone. We also have a leaderboard in place so that as you play the quick pick, you can see yourself rise to the top of the standings and compete against friends and whatever. So it became a lot of fun to do that, and that's how we do player rankings. So if you ever look at the Drafty player rankings and you're like, that sucks, like why is that player so far down? That doesn't make any sense at all. This site is stupid. Well, don't say this site is stupid. Go to the quick pick and actually put your opinions about players into the system. That's really, really exciting to me, and I hope you find it that way as well. Another thing that we have on Drafty is called Clubhouses. This is another brand new feature. It's still in beta because I don't want to launch it out of beta officially until I make sure that everything's working and I have the features in there that I want to put in there. But the Clubhouse is directed towards dynasty leagues for any sport. And it's targeting those leagues that have been together for 15, 20, 25 years and have maybe moved from site to site. So if you started on ESPN for 7 years and then you switched over to CBS for 3, and then Yahoo for 2, and then Flea Flicker for 6, you kind of lose your league history doing that swap. So what I want to do is provide a space for dynasty commissioners to come and save their league's history forever. A permanent off-season home is what I'm calling it for your league. And so you can sign up at draftysports.com/clubhouse. And it's really, really great. You can save your keeper values. You can create and assign trophies to league mates, and that is going to just be part of your clubhouse from now on. No matter what site your league is hosted on, you can have trophies and distribute those in your league, and it's really, really fun. So I hope you take an interest in that the way I do. I don't build anything that I'm not passionate about. So if you have any ideas for something you're passionate about, shoot me an email, commish@draftysports.com, and I'd be glad to dialogue with you about that and see if it would be a good fit for Drafty. See if I can build that for you. So yeah, that's a little bit about Drafty, the history of Drafty, the history of me. And so in this episode, I also want to tell you a little bit about why it's just me. I'm a one-man show over here in Drafty, so there's no customer support team. If you email somebody, it's going to be me. If you tweet at Drafty Sports, it's going to be me. If you subscribe on YouTube, that's going to be me. So just so you know, it's just me over here. I'm not trying to pretend I'm some big corporate entity because I'm not. But why do we charge for the services? And specifically, we don't charge a little, in my opinion. Our draft rooms are kind of expensive. So why do we do that? And it's because everybody gets money somehow. If you go to participate on another website and it's a free website, it's not really free because they have ads on their website. And even if you don't click on the ad, those ads are part of a network. And I'm just telling you this because I'm a web developer. I know how this works on the back end. I've set up these ads for clients in the past. And so when you sign up on a website and you see ads on that website, you can sometimes pay for the premium version and you won't see those ads, but more than likely you're still being tracked. But those ads are part of a larger network and I'll always follow you around the internet so that they can show you relevant ads, personalized for you. So it's interesting to you. That's what they say. But really, they're following you around the internet. They know who you are. They sell your data to other companies so that they can also advertise to you. So anytime you sign up for a website and that site has ads on it, you have basically signed away your email address and given it over to that ad company. And so as a result, you're going to get spam email, you're going to get spam texts, maybe not immediately. Like this isn't going to happen immediately, but you will see it over time. You'll begin to get more and more spam. The more websites you sign up for, that just makes sense. So that's a little bit about the history of ads, I guess. But Drafty is 100% ad free. There are no ads on Drafty. There's no Facebook pixel. There's no social media tracking whatsoever. The only tracking that we have on the website is two things. One, for the live chat, which again, I'm the person behind live chat. If you ever jump into live chat, I'm the guy. And so we don't share that with anybody, and the live chat software we use is also very big on privacy. So there's the live chat, and then there's the Google Analytics. Now, Google Analytics is one of those tricky things because it is the free analytics. And so I have a script on the website on draftysports.com that follows you so that I can see how confusing the website is. I can see, how many people came to a specific type of page and how many dropped off on that page, etc. So it's informative to me, but I don't know anything about you. Google, however, does know more about you because I don't have the stats right in front of me, but like something crazy like 80 to 90% of the internet, of websites on the internet, use Google Analytics. And so, again, Google is kind of the mothership, kind of like an ad network. That's exactly what Google is. Actually, 80% of their revenue is from ads, advertising on search engines and things. And so when you visit another website and that website has Google Analytics, Google now knows that you visited draftysports.com and you visited fantasypros.com and you went to cbssports.com or something. And so now they have a pretty good picture of, okay, this person is really into fantasy sports. So you're going to see more advertising around the internet for fantasy sports. And so they're all interconnected. Advertising and Google, they're all interconnected. I do hope to switch Drafty eventually to Fathom Analytics, which is a privacy-first analytics company. But again, it is a paid product. And so now that Drafty is generating a little bit of revenue, I hopefully will soon make that switch to really enforce privacy first on Drafty. But just know when you sign up on Drafty, you do provide your name and your email address. No one ever gets that information except for me. That's never shared with Google. That's never shared with a social media tracker of any kind. That is just for me, and I don't use it for anything. I promise. Like I don't even email you. You'll see that you never get an email from Drafty, and that's because I just don't send emails. I just don't have time for it, honestly. Eventually, I will build in some email notifications for clubhouses or for email notifications to invite league mates to join a draft room or something like that. But for now, there is absolutely nothing I use your email address for. It is purely for authentication. So one account per person, and each person has their own email address. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And this year, I used email addresses to authenticate people trying to join a draft room. Next year, that's going to change a little bit, and I'm actually going to show that to you hopefully in the next episode of this podcast, which is going to be great, I think, because one of the biggest problems we had this year during the draft season was people getting confused about how to get their league mates into the draft room, because the league mate came and they saw a message that said the commission needed to approve their email. So it was tricky business. I'll talk more about it in the next podcast episode. So again, hit subscribe on YouTube or follow Drafty Sports on any of the social media, and you'll get notified when that episode comes out. Should be really interesting. And I will show you what the next iteration of that looks like for assigning a team to a user. Assigning your league mate to a team when they try to join the draft. It's gonna be really nifty. I look forward to it. But I still have not answered the question, why do we charge for services? Because I don't have ads on Drafty, and as a result, I cannot offer Drafty for free because, as I said, this is a huge amount of time that I've spent to curate these resources for you to build these auction draft rooms. And I simply could not do it if it was all for free. And so rather than being part of the problem and having ads on Drafty, and just kind of feeding that subscription model mindset of yeah, you get it for free and we'll just sell your information to ad companies, or you can pay like $20 a month or whatever, and get the, I didn't want to put a paywall up, and I didn't want to put ads up. So the only thing I can do is charge for the services. So you can mock draft on Drafty for free. You can do the quick pick for free. You can play the mini games for free. We have preseason pick'em for a lot of the sports. We have um, a win-loss projector thing for a couple of the different sports. So a lot of mini games that you can play. They're not very popular right now, but hopefully they will be in the future. If they're not very popular in a couple years, I'll just take them off. No big deal. But again, so no ads, no tracking, no paywall. And so as a result, I have to charge for something so that I can devote more time into the features. And the beauty of this model is that you know what you're paying for, because your commissioner pays a fee when they set up the draft room, or your commissioner pays a fee when they set up a clubhouse. And so it's very clear what they're paying for. And then if they don't like it, they leave and they never come back and they never pay another dime. It's not a subscription based. The Clubhouse does require a payment every year, but it does not automatically renew, so you're not going to forget about it on your card, and it's just going to happen again. But so yeah, that's why we charge for the draft rooms. But also, I guess the last thing, and I have to say it, is that it's just a better draft room. It is, and the feedback I'm getting from users, from commissioners, from drafters is a testimony to that. You can see those quotes by going to draftysports.com, and if you scroll down just a hair, you'll see 3 quotes. And if you reload the page, 3 more quotes will pop up. Those are all quotes from real drafters who have come to Drafty, used the draft room, and had something to say. I didn't send out a survey to anybody. These are quotes from people. Either I was already having a back and forth with them via email, helping them with their draft room, or they loved the experience so much they sent me an email out of the blue afterward, which is really, really rare. So go look at some of those quotes if you don't believe me, but we just have a better draft room. So if you want a premium draft room, you can draft on Drafty, but it will cost you a little bit. So think about it like that. So that's a bit about Drafty. Drafting is my business. I love this. I'm passionate about it. But privacy does come first. And so I wanted to lead this new podcast off with episode 1, making sure that you understand where my mind is and why I do that. So in future episodes, again, you can kind of expect more of a technical emphasis. Again, I'm not going to teach anybody how to code, but I am going to talk through the mechanisms and the challenges that I faced in building Drafty, and the challenges facing me as I'm trying to improve things moving forward. So if you have any suggestions or questions, things that you might want to hear me talk about, please drop those in the comments on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It doesn't matter where you put it, I will see it. I also have a Patreon account, patreon.com/Daniel Fowler, if you want to just support me in general and support my development efforts. So I appreciate that if you choose to do that. So yeah, that I think is going to conclude episode 1. So look forward to seeing you next week for episode 2. This is Draft Business as usual. Thanks for joining.